Chapter 2. Running Scared. As per usual, I was seated next to Henry whilst he was working. In reality, that meant he pretended to clean the counter as he was chatting with me. I had my sketchbook with me this time, and I was doodling pictures of the row battle Snow, Metabee, Icky, and I had a few days ago. Snow was sitting next to me on the floor. Silent and still as a statue, she quietly observed me, Henry, and the environment. Hey, what direction do Metabee's rocket launches point? I asked absent-mindedly, unable to recall. Outwardly, in an X pattern, 2 big cylinders at the front and 2 small ones in the back, and they each have 6 holes in the sides, and... Henry rambled, then stopped himself, and I knitted my eyebrows together. I didn't know you had such good visual memory, I mumbled, impressed, but also a touch suspicious. This wasn't the first time Henry had said or done something unusual. Sometimes I got the feeling he was hiding something. I just spent a lot of time staring at the box he came in, Henry said quickly, because it was standing here, behind the counter, and I stand behind the counter, because that's my job. He gave me a toothy grin, and I chuckled, supposing it was as good an explanation as any. Maybe I'm just paranoid. Anxiety's been pretty awful lately. I didn't get much more time to dwell on it because in came 4 exhausted, sweaty children. One of them was Icky, the other 3 were unfamiliar to me. They snuck below the windows into the seating area and collapsed on the floor. I shared a moment of eye contact with Henry, concern flickering across both our faces. You guys don't look so good, Henry stated gently, as I wondered whether we would need to call some parents. Coach Mountain is burning us out, the brown-haired girl groaned. The chain her orange-tinted glasses hung from jingled lightly as she sat up a little, leaning with her back against one of the red stools. Every time he sees us, he makes us exercise. I think he's finally lost it. We're going to go to sleep now, Icky grumbled, closing his eyes. He can't find us there. The girl sighed, and the amount of relief in her voice was all too familiar, which alarmed me. I had had some awful experiences in PE class when I was still young. Too many times to count had I been pushed past my limit, a limit which I could not know or understand until many, many years later, when I was finally diagnosed with my many chronic conditions. Snow placed her hand on my knee very softly, but I still started at the contact. I took a breath upon realizing it was her. She was so tuned into my every mood that she could sense when my anxiety peaked or when I was caught up in a painful memory. The silent, strong look in her eye reminded me that the vast majority of children did not have my health issues and that it was most likely fine. I was still surprised by just how much Snow could convey to me without a single word, but then again, she'd been with me for many, many years, and she'd watched me struggle through those gym classes too. As I got up from my wheelchair, gritting my teeth and breathing deeply, I got up from my wheelchair, breathing... Nope. I got up from my wheelchair, gritting my teeth and breathing deeply. Leaning on the counter, I took a moment to allow my heart to catch up. As soon as I was standing, I turned my head to find Henry was already looking at me. The concern in his eyes saddened me, but I motioned to the children. Do you have any towels or pillows in the staff room? I asked softly, and he nodded. Yeah, in the wardrobe. Can you get them by yourself, or do you need help? I shook my head, holding onto the counter as I scooted past the children. I got it, don't worry, I reassured him quickly. Snow's with me. Then Metabee, who'd been looking at the magazine, spotted Snow and came running up to us. Hey! He yelled, but Snow quickly raised a finger to her face. Shh! She hissed, but then, as he froze in his tracks and apologized in a softer tone, more friendly, Hello, Bee. I smiled softly. Would you please help us carry, Metabee? Metabee nodded. I'm on it, he exclaimed, raising his arms. I made my way past the counter and walked over to the door that led to the back of the building. Snow opened it for me, and we walked into the storage space, then found our way to the staff room. I opened the door to the wardrobe and rummaged through the mess inside, trying to find something comfortable for the children to lie on. I sniffed at all the dust that came up. So Snow, that row battle we had the other day, that was totally awesome. I haven't been able to stop thinking about it at all. And I was thinking maybe, just maybe, if Icky stops having such a big head and thinking he knows everything, I'd consider working with him. Snow laughed softly at that. Progress is progress, she chuckled and tapped him on the forehead with a long, pointy claws in a gesture of camaraderie. I smiled as I overheard their conversation. So, Mr. Loose Cannon, how many pillows do you think you can carry? I asked, and Metabee would have grinned if he could. More than you, he yelled as he ran over to me. Well, that's not much of a feat, you know. I laughed, and Snow came up as well, taking 2 pillows. I rubbed my nose and quickly closed the wardrobe, my eyes and nose already itchy. Gosh, I hope none of these kids have allergies, I groaned lightly as we exited the staff room. They're only allergic to working out, Metabee joked before entering the front of the shop. It's pathetic, really. They can't even take a little exercise. Snow froze as I did. Think before you speak, she hissed, and Metabee laid eyes on my wheelchair, then glanced back at me. I didn't mean it like that, he said quickly, apologetic. I smiled kindly. It's all right, I reassured. I know you didn't. Metabee remained quiet until Snow and I walked past him and handed 2 of the children some pillows. Metabee handed a pillow as well, but threw his last one at Icky, chuckling. Icky grumbled a little, but was glad to take the pillow. Henry had gotten them each some drinks, and for the time being we just kept an eye on them. I leaned on the counter because my wheelchair was standing behind the children. I didn't want to disturb them just to get to it. I was just about to ask Henry what we should do when another child came barging into the store. Guys, check it out, she yelled, and the kids roused. Ah, Icky groaned. Erika? The new kid, clad in bright pink overalls, carried with her a fossil of a video camera. Probably an old thing her grandparents had lying around that she was allowed to play with. She showed a video on it that seemed to pique everyone's interest immediately. Huh? Coach Mountain? Icky exclaimed. I furrowed my brow, realizing it was the same person who made the children run until they quite literally collapsed. What's he doing? What? He's got a Medabot? They all yelled in unison, and I flinched. I don't believe it, the girl with the orange-tinted glasses grumbled at last. I thought he hated Medabots, so now we know what he's been up to this whole time. That reminds me, said Icky. I saw him with this huge wad of cash. The other children gasped, and my eyes widened in surprise. We saw him talking to 2 guys at school, but they sure weren't teachers. The shortest of the children chimed in. I looked up at Henry. He too seemed taken aback. Yes, Erika grinned, holding up her camera. Now this is a new story. A wad of cash, shady characters, and a gym teacher who's not what he appears. So, Coach Mountain is getting his Medabot to collect our sweat so he can sell it to mad scientists, the other girl growled, clenching her hands to fists. I wonder what they do with it, the spiky-haired child pondered. They could do a lot with the amount I sweat. Hey, whoa, hold on a sec. Henry, thinking this was getting a little out of hand, tried to interject, but Erika immediately cut him off. Okay, first we figure out what Mountain's up to, then we expose him, she said, passion in her voice. It's not right for him to profit from your pain. You're right. We work hard for our sweat. If anyone should make money off it, it should be me, the other girl nodded. Right on. You said it, boss. The other two kids cheered her on. How about it, Icky? Erika asked, serious as could be. I hope Coach Mountain's been drinking lots of fluids, because when we're finished with him, he's the one who's going to be sweating, Icky yelled, and the other kids joined him, running out the store together. Yeah! Is it just me, or has all that sun finally fried their brains? Metabee joked, but I frowned harshly as Snow helped me to my wheelchair. Maybe their theory is a little out there, I contemplated as I sat down. But, Henry frowned, I know what you mean. It doesn't exactly sound innocent. What time is it? I asked, packing up my sketchbook and drawing utensils. Henry glanced over at the clock. It's almost 6, he replied, but before he could ask why, I handed Snow my backpack and looked up at him intently. Do you work the night shift? He shook his head slowly. Then let's go, I urged. Come on, we must at least see that they get home safely. I have a feeling... Medaby crossed his arms, looking out the window. And you'd be right. There they go. In the opposite direction. Medaby, would you go on ahead and catch up with them and tell them to wait for us? I asked him, and he nodded. Got it, he exclaimed, and ran out the store, after the children. Henry had busied himself closing up the shop, and Snow stuffed my bag into the compartment in the back of my wheelchair. As she pushed the chair forward, Henry held the door open for us. We waited outside as he locked it, and I anxiously looked over my shoulder, watching the kids disappear behind the far street corner and Medaby running after them. The sun was setting. Henry fiddled with the lock, grumbling under his breath, but eventually managed. All right, let's go, he said, and I nodded, then pointed in the direction I'd last seen the children. They went that way. Henry took the lead, and Snow pushed my chair forward. It took us a while to reach the street corner, and when we finally got past it, my heart sank. The children were nowhere to be found, and neither was Medaby. I glanced up at Henry, and we had a brief moment of worried eye contact. Then I saw a flicker of determination pass across his face as he furrowed his brow slightly. He turned to the building on our left and found a drain pipe, grabbed it, and, much to my surprise, scaled the wall as though it was nothing. Both Snow and I watched in utter disbelief for a few seconds, but Henry had found what he was looking for, and grinned widely as he jumped down. They're over there, by the vending machine. He froze momentarily as he saw us both looking at him, wide-eyed. He stammered, his cheeks turning a shade darker. I do, free running in my spare time. I nodded slowly, but then motioned to get going. I thought I saw him breathe a sigh of relief as he turned to catch up with the children. We made our way through the small crowd of people, which was harder than it needed to be with the wheelchair, but Snow did a great job navigating. She was getting better at it. How old are they anyway? I asked, concern etched across my features. Like 10, 11? Henry ventured a guess. I narrowed my eyes and clenched my jaw. When we finally got to the vending machine, of course the children had disappeared again, but Henry spotted them up ahead and jogged on. A sense of great shame and sadness washed over me as I watched him. I clenched my jaw. Damn it, if only I could just run. I had never been able to run well, but it was moments like these that it really bothered me. If I had been able to run, we'd have caught up with the children so much faster. If I had been able to run, I wouldn't slow Henry down. If I had been able to run, I wouldn't have to be so scared. Saskia. Snow snapped me out of my thoughts as she continued to push the chair after Henry. I inhaled and sighed softly. I hadn't realized I'd been holding my breath. We'll catch up with them, Snow reassured me. It'll be all right. Even if something happens, we're close by. I took a deep breath, realizing Snow was right. By then, Henry had realized how far ahead of us he'd gotten, and he slowed his pace until we were on equal footing again. Are you okay? He asked softly, and I fidgeted with my nails. Not really, but I'll be fine. I'm just so worried about those kids. I don't want them sticking their noses where they shouldn't. Who pays in cash nowadays? No store takes money like that. Something's up. Henry furrowed his brow, keeping up with the brisk pace Snow set. I hear you, he said. It's suspicious as hell. I shook my head. I don't want to get to the bottom of it, I said quickly. I just want those children safe. Snow halted abruptly, and I had to grip my chair, or else I'd have fallen out of it. They're headed into the entertainment district. Henry muttered a curse word under his breath. We'll lose them in there, he exclaimed. Let's hurry, Snow, I urged, and she nodded, pushing the chair onwards. By this time, the sun had set. It was raining softly. The abundance of lights, noise, and the crowds of people quickly overwhelmed me. Car horns everywhere, people shouting and laughing, flashing signs. It was far too much sensory input for my liking. In the midst of all the chaos, I couldn't possibly keep my eyes fixed on the children. The way the traffic lights reflected in the wet, textured asphalt messed with my eyes and drew all my attention. The sight was so jarring, I thought I could feel the rough, bumpy surface at my fingertips. The sensation of the lukewarm raindrops on my face and the humidity in the atmosphere made my skin crawl. I narrowed my eyes, trying to keep my focus on Medaby. The way his metal body gleamed with his movements, reflecting the neon signs, was my only hope. Thankfully, Henry was able to focus a lot better than me and strode onwards, blissfully unbothered. I appreciated seeing the world the way I did, because I felt it allowed me to appreciate creation in all its natural beauty, but sometimes, during moments like these, I wished I was neurotypical like him. Snow kept pushing me onwards, hurrying. Henry adopted a light jog, holding his hand up to shield his eyes from the rain. I might as well have closed my eyes. I wasn't much help at all. Again, that sense of overwhelming shame engulfed me. The children took a turn into the back alley, and we just about managed to follow them, only to watch them disappear behind another corner. Henry and I didn't say anything as we sped after them. I narrowed my eyes as I saw the children talking with adults, screaming and running away. My breath quickened. It was Henry who snapped me out of my anxiety for a moment. "Do you want me to push a chair? We've almost got them." I glanced over at Snow, realizing just how ill-suited her many spikes were for this sort of task, and how she had to strain herself to look past me because of her height. I simply nodded, and Henry took over for Snow. Almost immediately, it became apparent just how much of a difference it made. With Henry pushing me, we were a lot faster, and now almost caught up. The children made their way through the maze of back alleys and onto a larger road again, where they were stopped by two older men. My breath caught in my throat. I realized in an instant how drunk and friendly they were. My heart leapt into my throat. "Snow!" I shouted, the panic in my voice ringing clear. My Medabot didn't waste a second. She shot forward and put herself between the children and the drunk men, pointing her claws at them. "Get away from these kids, now!" she growled, and the children gasped in surprise. "Huh? Snow, what are you doing here?" Iggy asked, and Metabee groaned. "I've been trying to tell you this whole time, but you won't listen!" The drunk men held their hands up at Snow's threat. Whoa, we just wanted to sing some karaoke together," one of them exclaimed in an effort to appear innocent. I couldn't stand it anymore. The second Snow ran, I pushed myself up from the chair and stumbled forward, my panic bidding me to run. "Leave them alone!" I yelled, my voice coated thickly with fear and anger. "Whoa!" Henry exclaimed and ran after me, just in time to catch me. I collapsed against him, trembling and breathing heavy. "Go away! Leave!" I heaved, though at my limit physically. The sheer emotion in my voice and Snow's sharp claws were enough to deter the men. "Whatever, they probably can't sing very well anyways." As I realized the children were safe, I relaxed, but tensed up again immediately upon noticing just how fast my heart was beating and how my vision blurred. I blinked and tried to slow my breathing. My hands and arms now shaking intensely, I allowed Henry to guide me back through the chair. He sat me down carefully and glanced expectantly at Snow, but she was busy making sure the children weren't going anywhere. "What do you need?" he asked me, turning back. "Can I help at all?" I glanced up at him, but couldn't stand the pity and concern in his eyes and looked away again. "Some water," I said, but truly I just needed to sit and wait and stay awake. Henry nodded and turned to find my water bottle in my bag. By that time, the children, Metabee, and Snow had realized something was wrong, and they gathered around me. Snow made sure they didn't come too close and gave me enough space to breathe. The bright neon lights blinded me, but I could make out their silhouettes. Are you all right?" I managed, and they nodded, which gave me great relief. A shiver travelled down my spine, and I felt my stomach complain. Henry handed me my water bottle. I took a sip and a deep breath. "We're fine, but are you?" Iggy asked. I nodded to reassure him, but my head was pounding. "Yes, it's nothing," I said quickly. "Just please don't run away. We're here to help." The child with the orange glasses whispered to the girl in the pink overalls, perhaps trying to be secretive, but because I was in such a state of high alert, I caught what she said. "Bit of an intense reaction, isn't it? She doesn't even know us." "Trust me, if you knew," I sighed, hardly realizing what I was saying. "What happened to me when I was a child, you wouldn't be so surprised." The children exchanged quick glances, and Metabee looked at Snow, but my Medabot lowered her head, clenching her hands to fists. Henry looked down at me with concern and kneeled beside me, his hands on the chair. Are you sure you're okay? He asked softly. I wasn't sure how to answer. Oh no, we lost Coach Mountain, Erika complained, spinning around to see if she could spot him. Seize this endeavour, Snow urged, but I shook my head. No, Snow. Look, if you must, at least let us come with you, I begged. I understand you won't stop, and we're not your parents, but please. I don't know how to say this, but it's dangerous out here. Henry nodded. I sat up a little, having found a little bit more clarity, even if my heart was still racing. The children looked at each other and nodded. All right. Boss, I want to go home, the child with the blue shirt whispered to the girl with the orange-tinted glasses, but she pushed him away. Zip it, Spike, she hissed. Not in front of the adults. I took a deep breath as Erika located Coach Mountain once more. There he is, she shouted and ran ahead, the rest of the kids hot on her trail. Snow and Metabee followed suit, and Henry pushed my wheelchair at a leisurely pace. I frowned, wanting to go faster, but I didn't want to trigger another attack either. So, is this what happens when you get up too fast? Henry asked, tentatively breaking the silence. You told me your heart beats too quickly so it can't get enough oxygen to your brain. Is that what it does to you? I nodded solemnly, staring ahead at the light gleaming off of Snow Blue's horns. Gleaming off of Snow's blue horns. Yeah, it's not fun. Whenever it happens, I feel like I'm dying. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to worry you. I was just so scared. Henry frowned. Don't apologize, he said softly. It's not your fault. I bit my lip, trying to force the tears that were welling up in my eyes back down. All my life, I'd been longing to hear those words. I sighed softly. I'll be fine, I promise, I said. It's normal. I've been through worse. Henry's frown deepened and I realized I'd said the wrong thing. Sorry, not like that. Gosh. I gave up and leaned back. It's okay, Sus. Just focus on your breathing. Henry reassured me, and I did as he said. More and more frustration arose within me as he continued to push me, following the children who thankfully didn't get too far ahead of us. I hate this. I hated being so dependent. I hated being so scared. I hated that I couldn't rely on my own legs, my own heart, my own body. I hated that I needed help. I hated being sick. I guess we will be getting to the bottom of this after all. Any theories, Holmes? Henry joked, trying to lift the heavy atmosphere. I couldn't help but smile. Well, my dear Watson, I certainly hope it's not... I halted in the middle of my sentence as the children did in their stride. Then, through the noises of the city nighttime cut the unmistakable clamour of a row battle. I glanced up at Henry, and he narrowed his eyes. The children ran ahead, down an alleyway, and we followed. There, we finally found what we'd been looking for. A gnarly-looking row battle. Two people who could certainly be classified as shady characters, and a mountain of a man. Coach Mountain! Icky exclaimed, confirming my suspicions, and ran up to him. I moved forward in my chair, sitting up, and about to tell him to be careful, when the PE teacher turned around and barked a warning. Stay back! It's not safe! I breathed out, glad the man seemed a little bit more reasonable than he'd been painted out to be. Sir, did they hurt you? Erika asked, approaching as well. I glanced up at the other two. Sir, did they hurt you? Erika asked, approaching as well. I glanced up at the other two adults. My brother and I are businessmen. We don't have to use violence to get what we want. One of them snickered, and I felt a chill down my spine. But your teacher, he wanted to row battle, but he can't even put up a decent fight. His MEDABOT's just a cheap piece of junk, and he doesn't even know how to use it. I narrowed my eyes at the contempt dripping from his voice. Sir, is this true? Icky asked, shocked. The other children approached as well, cautious. Snow and Metabee stepped in front of them to make sure they didn't get too close. Go home, their teacher barked. This has nothing to do with you. I say, let him stay. These kids are going to see us crush you, the brother with the khaki jacket sneered. I liked them less and less with every word. Along with your dreams of turning this place into a park. I narrowed my eyes, and the children exclaimed in surprise. A park? Then even more children appeared, and I breathed out a sigh. They crowded around Coach Mountain and begged him not to continue. Eureka tilted her head to decide in confusion. What's this? She asked, and the children explained that they had no park to play in, and whenever they played outside, they ended up with scrapes and bruises. I frowned softly, touched. I've been saving all the money I can to build a park for these kids, Coach Mountain said, with conviction in his eyes. But these guys want the land too. So whoever wins this row battle, Eureka mumbled, piecing the information together. Whoever wins gets to buy the land, the coach confirmed their suspicions. I have to, for the sake of these kids. I breathed out a sigh of relief, and Henry did too. That's admittedly a lot more innocent than I thought it was, he muttered, and I nodded. Agreed. Now that it was clear that there was no imminent danger, I felt the adrenaline subside. The only thing I was still concerned about were the two strangers stood atop their gravel heap, but they seemed to be civil enough to row battle and smart enough not to get their hands dirty. I winced, hit with pain and exhaustion as soon as I relaxed my muscles. Do you want to go home? Henry whispered to me, and I glanced up at him. What? He looked down at me with concern. I'm sure the coach can take care of them from here. Do you want to go home? If you want to go, that's okay. I shook my head. No, the row battle looks to be about done anyway. I want to see them get home safely. Henry nodded, respecting my choice. I'll stay with you, he promised, and I leaned back, resting my head against his forearm. I made a mental note to tell him how much I appreciated him later, knowing by now I was too overwhelmed to string those words together in a meaningful way. He glanced down at me, a blush creeping onto his face, but he didn't move or say anything. He looked up at the row battle as it continued, but narrowed his eyes as he saw the coach was losing. Badly. The businessman The businessman's mega fans knocked the Coach Mountain's dig mold down with a swing of the iron ball attached to his trunk. Coach Mountain's Medabot was badly damaged. I narrowed my eyes. I guess it's all over, the coach breathed out, kneeling down in defeat. My dream is slipping away. Icky slipped past Snow and ran up to his coach. Don't say that! Well, I was so looking forward to this. Thought I'd have a tougher opponent, though. Too bad, it didn't even count as practice. That was the first time the man in the purple suit had spoken. As the two walked away, Icky was fuming, Eureka taking notes for her article, and the other kids watched awkwardly, unsure of what to say or do. Just stay close, Snow told them, and they nodded quietly. Stop! Icky then shouted, and the men halted in their tracks. What do you want, kid? The man in the khaki yelled back, but his brother's face contorted into a sinister smile. Interesting. Hey, kid, why don't you take your teacher's place? We'll row battle again. My eyes widened. Don't do it, Icky, Henry warned, but as did his coach, but the sheer intensity of the okay. My eyes widened. Don't do it, Icky, Henry warned, as did his coach, but the sheer intensity of the determination plastered across the young boy's face told me there was no chance he'd be backing down, no matter what we said. I have to try, he shouted, and Medaby clenched his hands to fists, running over to take his place at Icky's side. I will not rest until I see those kids swinging from monkey bars, he vowed. Icky! Eureka exclaimed, moving to run after him, but the girl with the orange-tinted glasses grasped her by the shoulder. Don't, she said. He's going to win. Eureka turned back, stunned. Samantha? Let's do it, Icky! Medaby shouted, running ahead, and Icky followed with a, Yeah, bring it on! I crossed my arms. Look closely, I told Henry, and he glanced down at me. Huh? I nodded. Just in case. That thing's got thick armor. I doubt Medaby's bullets will be able to penetrate that plating. Keep an eye out for a weak spot." "Then it's agreed!" The familiar voice of Mr. Referee sounded as he rose from a pipe at the construction site. "I officially declare this match a submission row battle. Medafighters ready? All right, Medabots, row battle!" Both bots sprang into action, Megafant approaching rapidly and Metabee shooting at his target. As I suspected, the bullets couldn't put as much as As I suspected, the bullets couldn't put as much of a scratch. As I suspected, the bullets couldn't put as much as a scratch on Megafant's armor. Metabee realized it was futile, and then, much to my surprise, yelled to Icky for guidance. "What do I do?" I smiled, and Snow nodded, very glad to see that. "Wow, they're working together?" one of the kids, Spike, exclaimed. I think they both realize how much is at stake," Erika said, also surprised. "Go left! Aim for his caterpillar track!" Icky ordered, and Metabee leapt out of the way, then shot at the tank-type Medabot. I was relieved to see Icky had already noted how strong the armor was, and identified a potential weakness. That kid's got potential," Henry muttered, thinking the same as me. "Close, kid, but not close enough," Purple Suit taunted as Megafan simply turned to shield to block Metabee's bullets. "Metabee!" Icky yelled as his yellow bot was smacked to the ground. Ow! Hey, what do you think you're doing, Icky?" Metabee yelled, getting back to his feet. "Come up with something better!" "Let's put an end to this child's play," the older brother spat, grinning ruthlessly. I glanced over at Icky, who remained quiet as he clenched his hands to fists, thinking hard. "Attack, Megafant!" Megafant sped across the gravel and, by virtue of how fast he was going, lifted off the ground a little as he hit a bump. Icky realized something upon seeing its underside. "Metabee, run! Run away from him!" Icky yelled. Metabee wasn't sure what to think of that. "What?" he shouted back, unmoving, but Icky shook his head. "There's no time! Hurry! To the other side of that gravel heap!" Metabee and I both remembered how Icky had used the terrain to their advantage in their row battle against Snow and I, and so the KBT type decided to play along. He trekked up the side of the heap of gravel. He trekked up the side of the pile of gravel, Megafant fast approaching. Metabee's legs were no match for Megafant's caterpillar track. It was a miracle Metabee managed to reach the top first and dive down. "Now you're mine!" the man in the purple suit shouted, clearly enjoying the row battle, but something about the tone in his voice suggested to me that winning wasn't enough. Dominating and crushing whoever stood in his way was where he derived his enjoyment from. Megafan shared his Metafighter's enthusiasm in speeding across the gravel, launching himself forward, and left his underside wide open. "Attack, Metabee!" Icky shouted, and Henry and I both cheered as Metabee shot at Megafant's underside, hitting him right where it hurt. Megafant exploded and fell down, sustaining a significant amount of damage. The children and Coach Mountain watched in awe, and Samantha was grinning. She had been expecting this very outcome. The businessmen were in utter shock. Snow's eye gleamed with excitement. "He's got thick armor! Keep blasting!" Icky shouted, and Metabee did as ordered, launching rocket after rocket until Megafan shut down and ejected his medal. Mr. Referee declared Metabee the winner, and all the spectators erupted with excitement, congratulating the two on their win. Perhaps the happiest was Coach Mountain, who cried and sobbed as he embraced Icky and Metabee, who disappeared behind his huge arms in the bear hug. Purple Suit fell to his knees. I lost!" His brother followed his lead. "No!" "I knew they'd do it," Samantha said, and the short kid with her nodded. "Please, boss, can we go home now?" Spike whined. "Whew," Henry breathed out with a chuckle. "Glad that's over with." Snow left the children with the coach. The light of the street lamp gleamed off her armor and caught my attention, so I followed their movement. She approached Digmore, Coach Mountain's Medabot, and helped him up. "You did well," she told him, and he laughed a little. "I don't think I did, but at least the coach is happy." Behind the two Medabots, I watched the businessman gather Megafan's medal and insert it back into his body, haul him right side up, and droop off together, reluctantly relinquishing their claim on the land. Then, once Coach Mountain had gotten over the surprise and the relief, he let go of Icky and Metabee and crossed his arms. "Now that that's over with," he grumbled, then shouted, "What are you kids doing out here late at night? You have school tomorrow." Icky and the rest of the kids exchanged quick glances. No reason," Icky tried, but their coach leaned forward and furrowed his thick eyebrows. "Tenryo!" Henry and I shared a moment of eye contact, wondering if we should say something, when Snow tapped the man triple her size on his hip. "Excuse me, but your Medabot needs your attention," she stated, and Coach Mountain looked down at her, surprised and a little sheepish. "Uh-huh." "He's damaged," she said, motioning to Digmore, whose shovel hung off its hinges. The coach's expression shifted to one of concern as he knelt down in front of his Medabot. "I'm sorry, pal," he grumbled, grabbing his bot, and with one smooth motion, jammed the shovel back into place. My eyes widened at the feat of strength that seemed nothing to the mountain of a man. "Thanks, Coach," Digmore exclaimed, trying to move his arms and shovel, but managing only a little. Henry frowned and walked up, leaving me with the children. He knelt down and took a look at Digmore for the coach. Snow crossed her arms as she watched him, nodding in response to Coach Mountain's confused look. "Ah, there we go," Henry mumbled, finding a crooked gear that was giving the bot's mechanics trouble. He straightened it out, then leaned back. "Try again," he said, and Digmore did, now able to move properly. "Gee, thanks," he exclaimed, and Henry smiled happily. "No prob." The store clerk rose to his feet, as did the coach, who towered over Henry. "Thanks," Coach Mountain grumbled, a little embarrassed. Clearly I don't know nearly enough about Medabots to own one." Digmore stiffened, and Snow shook her head. "It's not so simple," she said. "You've taken one in, so it doesn't matter if you're prepared or not. Digmore is your Medabot now, so you'll just have to learn to take care of him." The coach blinked in surprise, clearly unfamiliar with the concept of a Medabot talking back to a human. I couldn't help but chuckle a little. Snow had no trouble being honest and direct. That's why she suited me so well. Communicating with her was easy. What?" Coach Mountain stuttered, looking down at what to him might as well have been a prickly blue and white metal porcupine. "It's not hard," Snow stated. Definitely not as hard as building a park." The coach chuckled a little at her comment and the irony of him, a teacher, getting schooled. "All right, little Medabot." Snow crossed her arms. "Digmore likes you," she said, unrelenting. That was such a surprise to the coach that he peered down at his own Medabot intently, who shuffled back a bit shy. Is that true, Digmore?" "Of course, Coach," he exclaimed. "You trained me. You believed in me. You row battled with me. That's more than I can ask for." Then I realized something. "He's a second-hand Medabot, isn't he?" I whispered to Metabee and Icky. They shared a brief moment of eye contact, then scrutinized Digmore. "I think you're right," Icky whispered, noting all of Digmore's scrapes and scratches couldn't possibly be from this single row battle. "Yeah, he must be," said Metabee, realizing how old of a model Digmore was. "Snow must have recognized that," I breathed. "That's why she's so adamant, because she was a second-hand Medabot too." Icky and Metabee gasped and looked at me. "Really?" I sighed softly, remembering. "Not all of her," I stated. "Her tin pet and parts my parents bought for me, but her medal I had found discarded." Metabee and Icky looked up at each other, then at my Medabot. "Poor Snow," Icky grumbled. "No, poor Digmore," Metabee exclaimed. "If the coach gives up on him, he'll be abandoned a second time." Icky looked back at Metabee. "We can't let that happen." I watched as Icky and Metabee sprinted up to their coach. "Coach Mountain!" Icky yelled. "Don't do it, Coach Mountain!" Metabee crossed his arms. "Yeah, you can't ditch poor old Digmore. That's cold, man." Coach Mountain stammered. "But I'm clearly unfit to be a metafighter. Even you were able to best me, Icky. We couldn't touch those guys, and you defeated them like it was nothing." "You don't have to be a metafighter to own a Medabot," Henry chipped in. "Plenty of people keep Medabots to help with household chores or assist in other ways. Heck, dick types are almost exclusively used in construction work." Icky and Metabee nodded profusely. Please, Coach Mountain. Beside me, Erika was taking pictures, capturing everything as we all watched in suspense. Coach Mountain looked down at his Digmole. Digmole, are you sure you don't mind staying with someone as uneducated as me? Digmole raised his arms, mimicking the coach flexing his muscles. We can learn together. The coach smiled and patted Digmole on the head. You guys, how can I say no to that? A happy ending, would you look at that? Erika exclaimed with a grin. I breathed out in relief. I felt strongly about MEDABOTS, especially second-hand ones. I had never been able to understand that some people only looked at them as machines when they were very clearly thinking and feeling beings. It occurred to me that if the coach had left Digmole, I wouldn't have hesitated a second about taking him in. After staking his claim on the land, Coach Mountain insisted on escorting each of the kids, bringing them back safely. Henry and Snow came back over to me to check up on me and help navigate the wheelchair. Spike, for one, seemed very glad to finally go home. Snow, Metabee, and Digmole took the lead, followed by the children, and Henry, Coach Mountain, and I brought up the rear. So, who are you, anyway? Coach Mountain asked us. Older siblings? Family friends? I sighed softly. Strangers, really. Concerned strangers. Henry nodded. The gym teacher crossed his arms and huffed. They're good kids, Henry said. They hang out at my store when school's out. We noticed they weren't planning on going home and felt compelled to make sure they were okay. Rest assured, by tomorrow these kids will severely reject their actions, Coach Mountain stated. I've got a new playground to water. With their sweat, they'll be running till they drop. Henry couldn't help but snicker, and I sighed softly, glad it was over. When we got back to town, Henry turned to Coach Mountain. Would you be opposed to taking them home? Saz has had enough excitement for one day, he said, and I sat up to protest, but pain shot through me as I moved, so I thought better of it. The coach nodded. Of course, I'm their teacher, so it should have been me looking after them anyway. Thank you, I said, and he gave me a nod, then turned to Snow, who had noticed we'd stopped and came running up to us. Thank you, Medabot, he said. Snow placed her hand on her chest as she arrived, a gesture of respect. The name Snow. Coach Mountain nodded to her as well. Snow, thank you. I'm glad to be able to keep Digmole. Snow took another step closer to me. And I'm glad he gets to stay with you. Coach Mountain, Digmole, Metabee, and the children went one way, and Henry, Snow, and I the other. Henry was still pushing my chair, and Snow walked beside me. I'll take you home if you'd like, Henry offered, and I glanced up at him, appreciative. Thank you, I said softly, and he smiled. Now that we were back in town, there was a lot less sensory input, but I was so overwhelmed that it didn't really matter. I was so exhausted, I leaned back in the chair and closed my eyes, holding onto Snow's hand. She stayed with me and made sure I knew that she was there. Here we are, Henry exclaimed happily as we reached my house. I looked up at him, ignoring the pain in my neck. Thank you, Henry. Seriously, you've been beyond kind. He smiled fondly. It's nothing. Then his phone rang, and I saw concern flicker across his face. He fished his phone out of his pocket, and though I didn't mean to pry, I caught a glimpse of the contact name of the person calling. Dr. something. I turned away and patted my clothes down, busying myself with brushing off any excess gravel that had gathered between the fabric as I tried my best not to overhear. I'll be there, Henry promised and hung up, and then turned back to me. Sorry, I gotta run, he said, apologetic. I nodded. It's all right, Hen. Thank you so much. I'll see you later? He grinned. Sure, store's always open for you. I smiled, and he nodded, then turned and ran down the driveway, onto the street, and disappeared from view soon after. I watched him leave with a soft smile. Snow took me inside, helped me stand up from the wheelchair, and assisted me up the stairs. Where would I be without you? I said softly, as she helped me sit down on my bed. Snow would have smiled if she could. Get some rest. You've had enough excitement for one day.